Hey, everybody. So just wanted to give a little bit of a quick warning that if you haven't listened to part one of this episode, you might do so first. This is an episode that we've split into several parts based on the songs that from the Earthbound soundtrack that we're listening to. And so it might not make complete sense what we're talking about if you haven't heard part one. But if you have, then, well, let's get going. Okay, so the first tune that we're going to look at from the Earthbound soundtrack is one of those that uses the samples as a way to act as kind of a surprise and as a way to just in almost an instant change the mood of what's happening and to make things turn in a much more serious direction almost instantaneously. So we are going to get a little bit into story on this, and this has to do with Ness's neighbor Pokey in Earthbound, or Porky in the original, and I think the Mother 3 fan translation also uses Porky. And with a name like Porky, you know, you already have a picture in your head, and it's pretty much right. This is a neighbor of Ness, the hero of the game, and he first appears like right at the very beginning. In fact, his brother is missing on the night that this meteor drops from the sky, and so Pokey/Porky goes to ask for Ness's help in searching for his brother, and which they do, and this is how they run into Buzz, from whom all the alien stuff that Pokey just hides in a corner and like sobs dramatically from, and so right away Pokey's purpose in the story is somewhat unveiled, that he is very much comic relief. His entire family is a little bit antagonistic toward Ness's family, because Porky's father loaned Ness's father like just a tiny bit of money once, and it wasn't paid back, and so they just Pokey's family just really dislikes Ness's family, and it kind of it treats Ness in kind of that way throughout the game. Pokey turns up later as one of the cultists, and now he's starting to get more sinister because he actually is part of the effort to kidnap the character Jill and to basically sacrifice her, and he apologizes later to Ness, and he wants to be friends again, but then he just kind of runs away. He shows up one more time and with his father, and now you're getting the trend that Pokey is someone who kind of gets in the middle of bad stuff that's going down, and his character is such that he's willing to do this. He's not an unwilling participant in stuff that is either just probably leaning toward unethical to full on immoral. But he is that kid that's going to be a part of it. And, but it's, so far, despite the seriousness of everything that's going wrong. And I mean, if you've played Earthbound, then you know this tone of the game that's just so interesting and brilliant, and that there's like some serious stuff going on in this game, and at the same time, like the tone is very light, and it's very comedic, and it's this really weird balance. And so you go through the game, it's like, Pokey like kidnaps a girl and tries to kill her. Oh, that Pokey. But it's part of what the game does to kind of pull its own punches, so that when it does punch, it surprises you. The game is trying to keep a very light tone so that when it goes dark, and it does go dark, you feel it. If it were any other, if it were any other game, like in the first town, like the police chief calls in a bunch of cops to go beat up a little boy, and so that for all intents and purposes should be, very dark scene. But if we're going to go that dark right away, then we burn out. We get emotionally exhausted by the end. But because it's kept light and because there's so much humor going on, that you more think of the game in those terms, like the humor. That's the part that you remember. And then when you get to the end and you kind of look back at everything that's happened, all of a sudden just the darkness just deepens. And that's exactly what happens in Pokey's last appearance in the game, because he's been gone for a while now. We haven't seen him in a while, and we're getting close to the end of the game, where we're going to have our final showdown with Gigas and take him on and end all the battles. But all of a sudden, there's Pokey, and he's kind of like he's like in this mechanical spider thing, and he's not looking well. And he tells you what he's been up to, and not to get too deep into the plot, but he basically got himself tied in with Gigas and is helping the bad guys again. And Pokey's one of those characters who doesn't seem to understand understand the difference between stealing lunch money from a schoolmate to kidnapping a girl to helping in the world. It's just all kind of what's in front of him. And so we start in on this battle before the main battle, and the game has trained you to think of Pokey as someone who is weak and scrawny, and not scrawny. I didn't mean he's big, but strength wise is scrawny, and just is not able to put up a fight and is kind of a coward. And so we get into this song, and it's a really good song, but you notice right away that it's done in an 8-bit NES style. So this is a tune that returns us to square waves and triangle waves the noise track of the NES to create this sound, and you feel like you are in an NES boss fight. And in that kind of sound in a game that has used sound so well is communicating a meaning that this is a boss fight, but it's not on the same level as the boss fight that we have experienced previously, or we're about to experience. It's like the difference between an 8-bit game and a 16-bit game. And so you're going right along, and then gradually you start realizing Pokey is actually kind of strong now. And at almost the exact moment that you're realizing that, the song changes into this. Now, I cannot think of a better guitar sample in an SNES game than that. It's like every time that games that I played tried to do something like that, it came off as just a little bit more mechanic, a little bit more, synthesized. And while the sound isn't perfect, and while we can hear that this is kind of MIDI format where we have a sample and we're playing along, something has happened in this game that they just went from 8-bit sounds for this boss to the kind of sounds that we have not heard before on this system. And like I said, that's about the moment that you're starting to realize Pokey's not falling down. He's not cowering in a corner. He's not like, just being a coward and running away. And in fact, his attacks hurt. And he seems to have a lot of hit points. And this is like, this is kind of the moment, because the last few segments of the game have gone in that serious turn. And when you get to Pokey, you almost have like this sigh of relief. It's like, oh, all right, we're going to have some comedy again, because what we've been going through has been very, very heavy. And it's like, okay, it's like this moment of fresh air, and then that moment is just taken away from you. And it's just brilliant the way it does it in the gameplay itself, but also in the music, where we now jump to this, kind of metal style, this great drums. By the way, the drum sound in this song is just great. This great drum sound, this really good distorted guitar sound, this kind of prog style, this just collision of ideas, of musical themes that swirl around, and it's actually quite long. I mean, this song, and keeping in mind, like, the soundtrack to this game is typically what they've done is given us just a whole lot of short themes. So nearly everything you do has a different song attached to it, but the songs are rather short. Whereas when you get to, like, I mean, if like you did like a Final Fantasy or something, the number of songs would be fewer, but the songs would be longer and have more movements and stuff. And that way they could use them in several scenes and it wouldn't get old. But in Earthbound, it's more likely that you'll have a short song with just one theme or two themes in it that is repeated, but it's never used again. And in this song goes a full 2 minutes without looping. And that is actually really unusual for the soundtrack. When you get the soundtrack, you have just like you have a ton of songs that are under 1 minute completely. And then you have some that are, that start looping and at about the minute mark and then fade out. But all these tracks, there are very, very few songs that are even over 2 minutes, much less 3. And this is one that once it loops once, you're well into the 3 minute mark. And so this song is designed to surprise you. But it wouldn't be nearly as effective without that particular tone. So just as a way of comparison, I do want to play a little bit of Uematsu's Final Fantasy V song, Clash on the Big Bridge or Battle at the Big Bridge, depending on the translation. This is one of the great classic pieces in Final Fantasy V. And so as I play this, it's like in recognizing that this is actually really high quality SNES music. But the reason we're playing it is that it's in a similar style, and it attempts to do the distorted guitar, even though they kind of bury it as almost background noise under the organ, which is the real driving factor here. And I think that they're burying it partially because the organ is really, really great, but partially because it does not have the same kind of quality, and it's not really pulling out the the notes as clearly as they need to be. And so as you listen to this, you're going to be able to hear the distorted guitar most clearly kind of at the end of this little clip. We're going to play a little bit ahead of time to get the context, but you're going to be able to hear it kind of in the background, adding the adding flavor to the piece. Now you'll notice even there, what we have here is really a top-notch soundtrack, but even there, the difference between the sample qualities between Final Fantasy V and this piece in Earthbound is really night and day. Earlier in the game, we didn't have the quality of a sample like we do here. That's all intentional. It's intentional that this is something that we are not at all expecting because we had not heard it before. It has the same sort of impact on us as when we were playing Final Fantasy VII and we get to the final battle and all of a sudden, the choir starts singing, and that's not something that ever happens before in the game. And that's Uematsu giving that sort of surprise punch that lets you know that things are much more serious than you thought they were. This is the Earthbound version of that, but obviously earlier than Final Fantasy VII. This is how Earthbound delivers this punch, and it's quite effective. And it's startling when you play it in the game. And it's just one of the many ways that the game just really really kind of keeps pushing on you at the end of the game, that to make you feel every moment of it, so that when you arrive at the catharsis of the game, at the climax, it is one of the most satisfying moments in video game history.